Hi everyone. In this video, we will look into one of the scopes offered by MuleSoft, which is parallel for each. In the past, I have demonstrated about for each. So now in this today's video, we'll look into the usage of parallel for each. Okay. So later on, I'll talk about the differences between for each and parallel for each. Okay. Let's get into parallel for each for now. Right. So it enables you to process a collection of messages by splitting the collection into pods that are simultaneously processed in separate routes within the scope of any limitation configured for concurrent processing. So it's similar to for each where the records will be I mean split into one and it will be processing through the flow, right? So after all the messages are processed, the results are aggregated following the same order they were in before the split, and then the flow continues. If an error is thrown in one route, processing continues in all the other routes until all finish processing. All right. So now we will look into all of this by using a demo project. Okay. Let's get into Studio. Right. So I have a project. Okay. To demonstrate this functionality, I'm going to create a flow for it. I'm dragging to the listener and I'm defining a path as parallel for each. All right. So the use case we are going to see is that we are going to write the incoming payload in iterative way into a file. Okay. So for that, I'm going to drag and drop my file module into my project. I think we already have it. Okay. Now I'm going to drag and drop a parallel for each scope into my flow. Yep. So if you look at the configuration of parallel for each, right, you will see something called max concurrency and timeout. So timeout is nothing but if you define some particular time, right, the processing should be completed within that particular time interval. If not, you will get the timeout error. And the collection is based on which the iteration should happen. And max concurrency is something that you can able to control the number of parallelism, right? So by default, whatever if you have 10 records, so all of those records will process in parallel, but you can control that by defining the value in this max concurrency. Okay. Now we are going to iterate based on the incoming payload. So I'm going to give the payload here. All right. So let's drag and drop this logger just to print the incoming payload, okay, for each iteration. So the expectation is that this parallel for each will iterate not in sequence, okay. But whereas if you look at the for each, it will iterate in sequentially, right? All right. So now I'm going to drag and drop a write component. Okay, so I'm going to use my local directory. Okay, so for that I have a file here. If you see, there is nothing, right? So I'm going to use this file to write the incoming payload. And let's say I'm going to okay, overwrite. Okay, fine. After this, outside this for each scope, I'm going to log the payload. Okay, let's see how the payload will be, because we have read that even though the records are processed in not in sequence, whereas the outside the parallel for each scope, you will see the payload in sequential manner. Okay, so yeah, that's why we are going to print the payload outside of the scope, and later on at the end we'll have a logger to say that the flow is completed. Okay. All right, so this is the flow for us. Okay, I'm just deploying. Let's wait until the project gets deployed. Okay, so now it is deployed. I'm going to postpone. I have my script ready. I'm going to pass an array 1, 2, 3, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in as a body. Okay, let's end. Right. So let's go to the logger and see. Yep. So as you could notice, right? You see, we have sent the payload. No, request is like in sequential manner, like 1 to 6, right? But if you look at the logger where we are printing the payload, if the logger is different, right? 2 to 6, 5, 3, 1, 4, and the flow ended. Now let's go to the response payload, how it was, right? So as I was saying, though the records are processed not in sequence, you will see the payload outside of the for each scope, I mean parallel for each scope, getting logged sequentially. You see this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. So this is like payload will say like similar to scatter gather, right? We'll cover the scatter gather in some other video, but for now, assume uh, payload is printed, and along with that we see the attributes of it, right? It's just like the scatter gather response. All right. So now, okay, now what if the variable, we have a variable, we are going to keep a variable here inside the parallel for each. All right. And in the variable, I'm going to name it as let's say numbers. Okay, as a name, and the value I'm going to capture is payload. Okay. At the end, after the variable, I'm going to drag and drop a logger. Okay, just to show you, just to show you what is the payload coming in, what is the variable getting stored. Okay, so I'm going to log payload and concatenating with a separating with a dash, followed by the vars, whatever we have, vars for numbers, right? All right. So in the transfer message, what I'm going to do, I'm going to capture that variable, try to capture the particular variable. Okay. Let's say I'm going to call this as a request, and um, let's say I'm going to capture the variable. Okay. So vars dot, what is it? Number, right? All right. So the scenario that we are trying to address is there a what happens if we try to capture the variable outside of the parallel for each scope. Okay, so we have a variable here where we are capturing the incoming payload. Okay, and we are logging it with the payload and the vars using a dash, and then finally outside of um, the scope we are trying to capture the variable. Okay, because the payload that we are trying to capture outside is an aggregated version, right? Now what happens in terms of variables, right? Let's run save it and let it get redeployed. I'm just clearing console. All right, so it got redeployed, triggering once again. All right, let's go to the console. Okay, so now this time it got processed sequentially. I mean, just printed sequentially, but if you see the vars, right? This is the vars, right? So you see this 3, 6, 5. This is a payload dash variable, payload dash variable, right? Now what happens when we try to capture outside the scope? So this is the request. Okay, it becomes it looks good. Now variable. You see this variable, it becomes null. Why? Because we cannot capture the variable used within the parallel for each scope outside of the scope. Okay. So all I'm trying to say is, so the variable, right? Let's say we have we are passing 6 records. If you see here, we are passing 6 records. So for each record, a new thread will be created, and this variable will be created, I mean, independently for each of the records. So that's why we are not able to capture them outside this scope. Okay. All right. So let's see what is written in the file. It is fine because what we are doing, we are trying to. All right, we are not appending. Let's say I'm appending it. Okay, and I'm saving it. Okay, let's empty the file. Let's see what is happening. Okay, we'll try to see how the the payload is getting printed. Right, what sequence? Okay, yeah, it's ran. Sending a transaction. Let's go back to the file. Yeah, so this is the sequence in the order in which our payload got processed. Okay. All right. All right. So the main difference between for each and parallel for each is that for each processes the records in sequentially, whereas parallel for each does not do that. Okay. And in for each, if an error occurred, right, in between the iteration, it will terminate. The flow will get terminated. But whereas in parallel for each, um, as we talked about here, let's say if we have 6 records and if any one of them fail, it does not terminate the flow because all the 6 threads will be independent of each other. So it will try to complete processing, finish processing all of the records, and then finally it will throw the composite routing error, right? Yeah, if you want to handle this error, you have to go and use the try block. We'll look into this error handling part of it in another session. Okay. All right. So if you like this video, please do subscribe to the channel and share it. Until next time, thank you.